Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to save scenes in our Yamaha TF mixing console. These principles should apply to most other brands of digital mixers, but again, we've got our TF3 for the demo here today, so this is what we're going to be working on. This process will be the exact same if you have a TF1, a TF3 of course, or a TF5 and a TF rack. So no matter which TF console you're working on, this process is going to look the exact same. And I want to note that this discussion is purely about how we save scenes, but the topic of when to save scenes and how many to use is a completely different conversation. That's going to be based on a few different things, but what we're going to be going over today is like what to do when you have decided to add a scene into your board for your marching band show. Now I've got a couple of test scenes here for like a fake part 1 and part 2, and if you caught the video where we actually programmed all of the settings in this mixer for the upcoming season, you'll know that we set up this 2025 template scene at that point. And I really want to drive it home that you should wait to start saving scenes for different parts of your marching band show until you've developed a really good template scene, which means you've dialed in the gain settings, possibly the EQ settings for your soloist, depending on the situation, before you start doing scenes. Because when we start saving scenes, it's a lot easier if everything just sounds great most of the time from your template scene, instead of having to dial it in differently for every single scene. And if you've never used scenes before, or if you're new to using a digital mixer, scenes are essentially a save state. It basically takes a picture of all the settings in the whole soundboard, and it lets us recall or remember or load those settings for different parts of our marching band show. Now, one of the primary uses for this, for example, is turning on soloist mics and turning them back off. So like if we have a section of the show where the soloist is going to come up to the microphone and they're going to play their solo, we would use a scene, for example, to take that microphone volume and turn it up, and that would be a scene. And then when they're done playing and they go back to the field to join the rest of the ensemble, we use another scene to turn that mic down or off so that we're not hearing whatever sounds come through that microphone. And the reason that we would use a scene instead of just pushing the slider up or down manually is to ensure that there's consistency in the volume and that we have the same volume coming from our sound system every single time. You know, we preach consistency to the kids all the time for their playing, so it's helpful to be able to have consistency in our sound gear as well. That's kind of the way that I think about it. So again, that's a very small example of when you might put in a scene. It's just for soloists. And that's what our demo is going to be on today. I think most of the time, for most bands out there, turning a mic on and off for a soloist is like the #1 reason that we would use a scene. Sometimes we're going to use scenes to turn the front ensemble down or maybe back up. But most of the time, its primary function is to turn soloist mics on and off. So let's start out by kind of clearing my practice scenes here. And this is a very helpful function to know about, you know, especially if you did not do a factory reset on your board when you went to program it, or maybe you've got some other scenes in there that you just need to clear out. What you can do is highlight the scene that you want to delete. For this example, we're going to highlight part 2 here, and we're going to press the little utility menu button here. It's the dots and the little lines. And this side menu is going to pop up, and we're just going to hit the delete button. And it's going to ask, do we want to delete part 2? Yes. And then we're going to do the same for part 1 here. We're going to hit the utility key and then hit the delete button. And those are out of here. So now that we've got our 2025 template scene highlighted, I'm going to go ahead and recall this. And again, you should have spent some time developing this particular template scene during band camp. And then maybe towards the end of like the second week of band camp, maybe when you start doing, you know, your regular fall season rehearsals, that's when you can go in. That's when I recommend going in and starting to do some scenes. So at this point, we should have our template scene set up. And our template scene, in this case, you'll see I've got the front ensemble and the electronics, like they're turned up. So we should be getting volume from them, except for this blank channel. And we're going to save this as the template scene just so that we can remember how to do that. So we hit the store button and then we hit OK. So now our template scene is such that we can get sound. And let's say, for example, we have a pre-show, and in that pre-show, we're going to feature a duet to not only have an awesome pre-show, but also to practice, make it, or not to practice, but to like do a sound check to make sure that we have these mics turned on and working properly for the rest of the show. What we can do for our pre-show is turn these up, and let's say that they need to be down just a little bit, and let's say that we need to have the front ensemble down just a little bit too for the pre-show so that they're not like overpowering the soloist, right? And I'm just kind of coming up with this as we go here. So let's say we've got our levels set and we're ready to set the scene or save the scene for that pre-show. So we're going to go in here, and again, we've adjusted the 2025 template. You'll see this little E icon for edited next to the name of the scene. We're going to highlight the one underneath it or whichever other one you would like to save it to, and we're going to hit store. And this is where we can name this pre-show, just like that. And then in the comments, you could put duet mics. So that way you'll know in the comment, and you'll see it over here, that during the pre-show, the duet mics should be active. So we'll hit OK, and it'll ask us, do we want to store it? Yes. So you see the comment over here that says duet mics. And if we highlight the template scene, it says start here, right? So this is where we would start developing scenes from. So now we have a pre-show scene where soloist mics 1 and 2 are turned up, right? They're turned on so that we can hear them. And at the end of the pre-show is going to be like a full ensemble, big loud hit. You know, it's the opening of the show. We want those soloist mics to turn off because these duet members have gone back into the field to join the full ensemble. So what we'll do now is we'll turn these down and we'll push the front ensemble back up to full volume, because let's just say they have some big hits that they need to be a part of, right? So again, we've pushed these back up, we've pulled these soloist mics down. We're going to now hit the store button after selecting B3, so we've highlighted the one underneath the pre-show scene. We're going to hit the store button again, and we're going to put full hit duet mics off, just so that you know what's going on. And this could be like, you know, part 1, maybe it's, you know, the top of the show, right? The first big hit, part 1, top. Now, how you label the scene, the title, is going to be up to you, whatever makes the most sense to you and your team. Once you have that in, we're going to hit the OK button, the OK button again, and now we have a second scene for the show that's actually part 1, right? So like this stuff would be the judged stuff, unlike the pre-show. Yeah, so over in the comments, as you scroll through your scenes, having the comments over here is super helpful so that you can have an idea of what's coming up and what's going on. And as you'll see, so if I recall the template scene, again, to get us back to where we started, you'll see the faders should move a little bit. They kind of reset into place. And then for the pre-show, I'm going to recall the pre-show. Boom, everything moves back to how we saved it. So you'll see that those soloist or duet mics turned on. The front ensemble got brought down a little bit. And then when we hit the scene for the top of the show, that full ensemble hit, boom. The soloist mics turn down, they turn off, and the front ensemble goes back up. Now in this case, this TF3 has been in use for some time. And so some of the faders, you'll see they got sticky even though we pushed them all up to the same level. What's important to know here, if you have sticky faders, is that the mixer, the console, like the computer on the inside of this thing, is going to be looking at the computer values that were recalled when we hit the scene load button or the recall button. It's not necessarily going to be looking at where the fader physically is unless we move it a little bit. If we move the fader a little bit, then it's going to pick up that value. So just know that if your faders are a little sticky and you haven't cleaned them out or anything, that's okay because the computer is looking at the internal value. Just know that if you bump it even a little bit, the console is then going to pick up on whatever that adjusted value is. So just have that in mind. And that's pretty much it as far as saving scenes for something as basic as turning a pair of Soloist mics on and then back off. And the reason that I would encourage you to save scenes over the course of the show is just so that you can line it up and have the labels line up with the score of your show. Like if you wanted to turn the soloist back on for, you know, let's just say we wanted to turn them back on for part 1, letter B, right? We could save that. Solo mics on. There we go. So we could save this into a new scene to make sure that we know where we are in the show instead of going back to the pre-show scene just because we already have a scene where the duet mics are up. It's helpful just to have a chronological list of scenes that cycle throughout your show. Now, another helpful tip about the scenes menu here is that you can reorder them based on the number, the title, and the date that you save them at. So like what, you know, like the timestamp. If you want to get really fancy and you anticipate needing to shuffle scenes around, you could come up with some sort of naming scheme or title scheme so that you could insert scenes by resorting the list. But the basic way to do it is just with the numbers over here on the left. Now, let's talk about scene recall, or I'm sorry, recall safe. Now, recall safe was briefly touched on in the setup video, but I want to demonstrate how this works because we got a question on it and it's important to know. So in our setup video, we did recall safe for the stereo outputs and the subwoofer outputs, and we also activated recall safe for our DCA groups, which is our group volume control for the marimbas, the vibraphones, and the electronics. So those DCAs and these outputs are not affected by scenes, and that is a like console wide, soundboard wide. It affects the entire soundboard. So this menu is sort of on a higher level than where the scenes are located, right? So let's just give this a good example here. So I'm gonna go back into the scene menu and I'm gonna load our template scene. And again, on the template scene, we have, let's just use these synthesizer channels as a good example. We've got 2 channels for synth 1 left and right, and these are stereo linked together. And we've got 2 channels for stereo 2 left and right, which again are stereo linked together. If we go over here to scene A and recall this factory scene that just says general band, if we load this in, you'll see that where these synthesizer channels were, it's something else now, right? So like it's a completely different thing. All of these channels are different than where we had it in the template scene for marching band. So let's go back to our template scene, scene bank B, 2025 template, recall, and here's our normal channels back, right? If we go into the recall safe menu, we go here and then we go to recall safe, and if we tell the mixer, hey, we want these synthesizer channels to be safe from being scene recalled. We do not want scenes to affect these. Let's see what happens when we load that factory template. So this is in slot A2, general band. And before I load that scene, you'll see here, we've got our synthesizer channels, right? Well, when I load in the factory scene, here goes, 3, 2, 1, load. You'll see that these channels stay the same. They were unaffected by the scene change. And that is, again, that's console wide. So like we even changed what scene bank we were loading in, and those synthesizer channels stayed the same. Let's try loading in this jazz combo set. I'm gonna load in factory scene number A4, jazz combo set. And you'll see everything changed but our synth channels. These have stayed the same. So that is what recall safe is. It prevents the selected channel from being affected by scenes. It stays wherever you put it. Now, the important thing to kind of dig into the nuts and bolts with this, and let me load our template scene again just to get back to home base here. The important thing to know about the recall safe is that we can choose which different elements that make up the entire channel. We can select which elements we want to be affected or not. So in this example, I said, hey, I want the entire channel, everything associated with those electronics channels to be recall safe so that nothing is going to change between scenes. And I can even demonstrate that where, you know, if I, for example, load in the pre-show scene and I turn these down, you'll see that they don't pop back up because the pre-show scene, they were turned up, right? So when we have the all button selected on recall safe, everything is safe from being recalled. If we only wanted, for example, the names of the channel to be recall safe, we could select, okay, I only want the label here, which would be the label. I only want this to be safe from being recalled, in which case the volume sliders, again, let me go back to the scene list. If I now load in a different scene, you'll see that the faders moved and the name stayed the same. But what about if I, let's see here, if I do another scene, oops, this little fader's fallen off. If I go back over here, general band, and recall that one again, you'll see that the faders moved again, but the labels stay the same. So again, the point that I'm trying to drive home here, and I'm probably not doing the best job because I'm just kind of talking to you guys, is that we can select which different part of the channel we want to be safe from being recalled by scenes. And the reason that that's helpful for the main output channels and the DCA channels is because, at least in my philosophy and line of thinking with this, is that I want these to be available for live use, so that if I have to make a change, like during, you know, a performance or a contest run, I want the changes that I make to these macro groups to stay for the entire show. I want the main fader and the subwoofer fader to stay the same throughout the entire show instead of being recalled by scenes the entire time. With the channels, normally we don't want these to be recall safed. You could choose, for example, to have the names for all of your front ensemble stuff recall safe so that it's the same throughout your entire show. But generally, the more straightforward way to do it is to set your template scene, which we did in that other video, and just work off of this. So if all of your labels are set from your template scene, you'll be good to go because that'll copy down to each scene. So hopefully that's a decent look at how to save scenes and sort of the basic function of the recall safe feature that is built into most mixing consoles. Again, how many scenes you use and when to put them into the show is going to be up to you. That's like a different conversation you can have with the rest of your team. But in general, the basic rules of thumbs are wait until you get your template scene really dialed in. And again, that means making sure you get your gain set and your EQ set so that it sounds good most of the time. You would put a scene in for soloist mics to turn them on or off. And then from there, you can fine tune. You don't forget that you can resort the list of scenes based on the scene number, the title, and the date, and you can have the list go down or up both ways for all three columns. And then recall safe is for preventing a particular channel or an element of the channel from being affected by scenes. So if you've got questions, drop them down below. You know, I'm curious to know, like, what are some of your parameters for deciding on when to put in a scene? You know, how many scenes do you usually use for your show? I think most of the folks that I work with would probably say, you know, we have maybe 2 or 3 scenes per movement, again, mainly for soloist mics to turn on and off. Some folks only have 1 scene per movement of show. And for some of the more advanced groups where we have several soloist and wireless microphones, we got a ton of scenes because we have to turn mics on and off a whole lot. So anyhow, hope you enjoyed it. Again, drop any questions or comments or thoughts down below in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.